All right, we are going live. This is maybe not the most professional broadcasting of live, but we're going. And hold on. Oh, and we are live. So Tony, take it away. You have 10 folks that are logged in watching. So go ahead.
We are live. There are 10 folks. Okay, so we're still waiting for a few people. I don't know if I should say anything important yet. Hi, everybody that's on Facebook Live. We are going to wait for those people that are still logging in, but you can see where we are. We're at Bruce Vento Community Garden at Bruce Vento Elementary School in St. Paul, Minnesota with
Kirsten Saylor. I'm the school garden coordinator here at Bruce Vento Elementary. And I also work to support school gardens across St. Paul Public Schools.
And she's kind of like the garden guru known around the state.
Thank you.
About all the school garden and community garden information. If you need anything, usually Kirsten knows. So that's awesome. How many people do we have now logged in, Carrie? Are we getting up there?
Yep, we are at about 52. Pam Olson says hello from St. James.
Hi, Sam.
Pam.
Oh, not Sam. Pam. Okay, should we keep going, Carrie?
Yes, you should. You guys go ahead and get rolling. It's 9:01.
It's 9:01. All right. We're right in the heart of St. Paul, in the city, and we just had the city truck leave. They were jackhammering across the street on the sidewalk on the day that we're filming. Luckily, Kirsten went over and talked to the nice people, and they just drove away. So this is going to make life easier for us. But we do have our headsets on that are making it good for you to hear us and not everything else. But here we are in the school garden, and you know, last year on my teacher tour, I brought teachers into a dairy barn on a farm because we love bringing teachers onto farms. But really, when you think about students and what is realistic for teachers to be able to give students a taste of agriculture, school gardens are often the first taste that a student can have to understanding where their food comes from and why agriculture is important, and it gives them that experience of agriculture. So that's why this summer we decided to come to a school garden, and I picked Kirsten Saylor because, like I said, she's totally awesome and does so many great things in the school garden and has a ton of information to share with us today. We also understand that when you're thinking about school gardens, sometimes teachers get nervous about how do I make sure that I'm being safe in the garden. So what about food safety? What do I need to know? So don't worry. We also have Annalisa is joining us from Extension, and she's going to talk to us all about food safety in the garden, and she's going to let you know the information that you need to think about and know, and it's going to be a short taste of that, but she's going to give you information to be able to get everything you need to know and learn about that as well. So those are the two. We have Kirsten in the beginning, and then right at 9:30, Annalisa is going to be zooming in to us to share that food safety information. We want you to, as you're joining us, to go to the comment section and ask any questions that you have as we're touring this garden, and we'll try to stop and answer those as we go along. Now, if we don't get your question answered, there's also a really cool addition to your Zoom room this week. Each Zoom room will have an experienced school garden teacher that will be there to also answer questions. So if a question that was brought up during our live Facebook interview doesn't get answered, save it and bring it to your Zoom room, and hopefully that teacher will be able to give you some insight on an answer to that. I'm just making sure I'm giving you, the last thing is, right at 9:50 we'll end here, but don't forget that your Zoom link is in the email that Sue sent you, and it's also on our Facebook page, so you'll want to get to the Zoom link at 10 o'clock and then have your resource packet ready then with you at 10. All right, I think that's all of the notes I had to tell you, and we're going to get started and check out the garden. I hope if you guys don't have a garden at home, hopefully you'll be able to enjoy seeing how things are growing here, and maybe it will inspire you to start a garden this summer. There's still time, right, Kirsten? Totally. And then give you ideas on how, if you don't have one at your own school that you teach at, how you could start that as well. All right, so here we go. Why don't you give us a little intro on where we are and around the building?
All right. Well, welcome. I assume everybody there teaches or wants people to be teaching with the school garden, which is great. I'm a firm believer in it. I think it's a great way to engage kids, to engage communities. And it was one of the things that they had wanted to do here about 5 years ago. And so that was shortly before my time. And what they wanted to do was, we are in a very urban area. Food security is an issue in this area. And so food nutrition is also important. And the principal says, I want to feed the neighborhood. And so they put up some gardens, and I got involved when the gardens were starting to fall apart. And so this has been a couple times now we have kind of reinvented or evolved this garden to kind of meet the needs of safety and for the goals of the school. As you can imagine, a garden isn't going to feed all the kids or all the community, but what it does is set up the possibilities. We're going to teach people how to garden, as well as giving them the science, learning, and kind of alternative spaces for doing math and English and social studies. And so with that, I just want to kind of show you some of the features of this garden. We are at the very front of the building. Sue, if you look down there, that's the very, where you kind of see that table past there. That's the front of the building. That's the front door. We are in a very public spot. Right behind over there, you don't have to point, that's fine. Right over there, that's where the bus stop is. So we actually have a lot of people coming through here that are walking from that space or up that way. We have buses coming and going. So we have the potential to not only just teach kids, but to kind of provide an opportunity for residents to learn more and to actually enjoy the gifts of the garden. So here, let's start with where we're at. I always recommend have at least one sign. This is our welcome sign. It kind of says what we do it. Without this, it's a question mark to have people like, what is the space? What's going on? I could do better at signage. So you're going to think about, as we walk through the garden, what are the different places that I could be doing signage? And what are the thoughts that, what could I be communicating with signage to help meet these goals of instructing kids as well as community? All right, that's your job. All right, so right up here, you can kind of see, this used to be just green space. There's a bit of a slope. And so at the top of this hill here, they put 6 beds. For my purposes, I find 6 to be a good minimum number. But again, you have to work with what you have. It's just that with 6 and with a class size of about 25, you can pretty much divide the kids up between the different beds, give them enough working space so that they can talk to each other and work in smaller groups. Again, thinking like Boy Scouts, smaller groups can be really effective, and look about teams and roles that everybody can do. So this kind of goes to one of the points of making for a successful garden. Make it the kids' garden, give them jobs to do, maybe have them think about what the jobs are. What you have here is a COVID garden. I'm going to be quite honest with you. We actually have a theme for each grade. For our summer garden, we have 3 grades that are involved, and that is 1st grade and 4th grade and 5th grade. So 1st grade is beans. So we try and do that kind of cover crop, put the nitrogen back in. 4th grade is dark leafy greens because they are the best thing on the planet. No, but for Minnesota, where our growing environment is all over the place, like kale is one of the most magical things that you can grow, along with collards and broccoli and all different kinds of kale. So you can teach about variety and all these really great things, and they can last deep into the fall. So that's awesome. So COVID, here's my COVID indignant. This is lettuce. It's probably bitter right now, but for a long time we were able to harvest well, I wasn't. I reached out to my community, said, can you help us out? We have a lot of produce in the garden. Can you help get it to where it needs to go? And so they had volunteers come through here and harvest 50 bags of salad and pea tops, because that is also very yummy. Pea tops for the food bank. So we had several food drives. And so this garden has been feeding. It's not something I can do by myself. It definitely takes a village to make this garden go. Over here, we have a lot of things going on. Again, kind of indignant. There are some peas in here, but what happened in last fall is we had a mustard green that just went to seed. And so it's super awesome, because what it did is it shook out all the seeds, and now we had a rich bed of Mustard greens. And mustard greens are also one of those magical leafy greens. I didn't talk about 5th grade yet. 5th grade was our salsa garden. So those are your garden divas. So we put them at the very end. They're your tomatoes, your peppers, the things that like heat, the things that won't do well when it freezes. So in this garden during the summer and come the fall, we'll have something to show. So how do we do it though, right? Because everybody says they plant in the spring and they're gone during the whole part of it, and then they come back in the fall and they don't see anything. We plant it forward. So this way, each teacher just has to know their theme. So if I'm a 4th grade teacher, then all I have to know is dark leafy greens. I'm not asking you to know everything. I'm just asking you to explore and experiment with dark leafy greens because they cross every cultural cuisine and they're super healthy for you. And like I said, they can go deep into fall. So they're just a great food security crop. So 4th grade will plant it for the next crop of 4th graders, and then they'll harvest it. So it's not the best, and we've kind of looked at, could we do better? But right now, that's how we have it set up. So we have our beds. Oh, let me just mention that we had kind of a like quick garden toolkit before for raised beds. They kind of fell apart over a year, and it was very sad. So then when I came in, I said, let's use these corners. This is from Gardener Supply. And I don't know, Sue, if you can get a picture of this, but what it does is it holds the wood and prevents it from bowing out. You don't put a lot of strain on just a few spaces where the screws come in. And then this actually will pop off. If I had fingernails left. Oh, there we go. And I can actually stick a 2x2 in there and put up an instant fence around here. So I have fallen in love with these corners. And also this is cedar. It should last about 7 years. It could last a little less, a little more, depending upon the moisture. But this is something that I can reuse these over and over again then. And
Kirsten,
then this
I've
will work out. Yep.
got a couple questions for you.
Oh, right on.
One of them you've started to cover. We had a couple teachers asking about summer and how to start a garden so that they can do something while they're in school. And it sounds like you do it 1 grade level plants before the end of the summer, and then that same grade level teacher harvests the next year. So they kind of see the process backwards, but it's the best we can do in Minnesota. The other question that I don't think I've heard you cover yet, Joan was asking, she's always wanted to have a school garden, but has had problems with vandalism. Have you had any problems with that, or have any tips or strategies for preventing that or helping with that?
Again, I'm going to knock on wood. One of the basic principles of having a school garden is to have multiple people involved and have the kids as much involved in the garden as possible. I'm not saying it's a cure-all, but we have, again, I'm going to knock on wood, we've had really very little vandalism. In fact, I would say none. I will bring you point over to the tool shed over here. And that is our tool shed. I can't say that. Tool bin. We're not allowed to have tool sheds on school property, but this is a large tool bin. And we had a lock on here before, and it invited vandalism. It invited people to try and figure out what was so important that we had to put a lock on here. As soon as we took that off, no problems. I haven't lost anything, but really it just has some backup stuff. And I'll have in the spring, oh, here, I can show you here. Sorry. Yes. You guys, right before we started, I think we have a wasp problem. So I'm gonna carefully come over here. These are like little hats that you can put on your plants in the spring, like when you transplant them, to kind of keep them warm enough. And then because also the roots are trying to, oh my gosh, the roots are trying to support the root. They're not getting watered all the time is what I'm trying to say. So it helps keep some of that moisture in there so they're not like stressed out so bad. So I keep hats in there. I'm just gonna throw that over there for now. Okay, it's important to garden during COVID. That's what I have to say. I think partly why we have wasps is because we haven't used the garden as much. So always have a plan that involves multiple people. If you can get a summer partner or summer kids or some kind of youth organization to come in during the summer, do so. All right, go on. What was the other question? Are we still here?
I'm sorry. That was the main question.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
we do have a lot of people loving those corners that you shared.
Yes.
Can you tell us again what those were called and where you found them?
They're just raised bed corners, and I got them at gardenersupply.com.
Okay.
They are not cheap, but they're not all that expensive. And I would also want to point out that I learned that 12 inches was not okay. We needed to go to at least 18 to 24 inches. We have put together a school garden handbook for St. Paul Public Schools, and then that I was able to work with facilities to kind of get some of the garden design basic principles that we need to put into place. With that, then we learned that it's really a lot safer for multiple reasons to have it really raised up at least 18 inches. This way, like if I trip backwards, I'm just going to sit down. If I had it at 12 inches, I might actually hit my head pretty hard. And I almost lost a volunteer once. It's also great for instruction, and it's great for my older volunteers who really can't get down. So it really makes for a much better teaching garden. All right, any other questions, quick ones?
Nope, continue on.
All right, so if you'll point down right here, we have our strawberry bed. This is a permanent bed. In this gives you an idea of what used to be here, but it's holding on. This is a great one, it's a June bearing, and so it will come up at the very end of our school year. So it's been great. They can watch for the flowers, they can see pollinators, and then they can understand that a fruit comes from the flower. That's what we need. All right, as you might see here, we have some runaway food plants. I have mustard green, and over here we're experimenting with trying to put in some clover. In where we have wood chips now, you can see that nature abhors a vacuum. And so we're gonna try and fill that vacuum with clover so we don't have to pull so many weeds all the time. It's a trial, and we're just gonna give it a shot to see what will happen with that. That way they don't have to mow so much, or we just need to come in here and weed whack once or twice. We're doing a lot of green beans. It's a low maintenance plant. It's also considered a cover crop. And as I mentioned with first grade, it means that we're enriching the soil. They're learning about protein. And then as they have the beans, if they don't get picked, they can use it for math. They can harvest the beans, the dried pods, and then they can kind of do how many pods end up in how many beans in a pod. We also talk about watering. I have a bunch of these available, and I have a lot of yogurt cups with holes on the bottom, probably not this big. And I'll just have the kids come out here and water. This is one of the ways in which they can own their garden. It doesn't have to be one kid only watering, but I just fill up the buckets and everybody can water. And because they're raised beds, I really can't overwater. If anything, I teach them to go low and slow, sit right over the plant that you're watering. Remember, they would be much more small when they're put in. And then that way, where's the water going? Always thinking about gravity and helping them work through these concepts of earth science. All right, there's a fence right here. This used to be our red tulip garden. They will plant this one in the fall, and it's a really great, there's a pop of red in the spring, and it is unfortunately not much going on right here, but it's awesome. And then we had a milkweed patch over here. I want you to don't move anymore. Milkweed patch, and you can see right here that it's working. It's a great pollinator, and that they have moved out. And I think for right now, this is exactly how we want it, because it makes for a great wonderland. We do need to address these wasps, though. So there are realities in having a garden and outdoor space, but you have that inside too, between mice and ants and whatnot, right? Lastly, can you see the compost bin from here? So I do say you should have a compost bin. It's part of that cycle of life. Always have a pollinator garden if you're going to have a food garden. You could start with a pollinator garden outside. It's a lot less work. And kids love flowers. So that's part of it. And they love insects. So that might be the draw in to help you build up your skill set for having a school garden. You could add a plant, you could have a bigger garden here and then, but have your pollinator garden first. The compost bin has been a way for us to put stuff in here. I talk about how the plant matter will be decomposed to become food for the plants for the next year. All right.
All right, Kirsten, so you are frozen right now. So I just sent Sue a message to back up some. She had better signal before. But we also have a question for you from Stephanie about the interpretive signs that you passed just a few moments ago. How do you make those, and is there student involvement?
These actually, this one is actually something that we did at SPPS to say, if you're going to grow food, this is a garden safely with COVID sign. And no, the students didn't help us with this one. You could very well, like if you have a printer or anything, find out how much it costs. I'm really upset that I didn't understand before that it was only $6 to have one of these made through our copy print department. I could have a lot more. So that has been one of the things that over this spring that I've been meeting with different school gardens and saying, what's your plan for the summer? And as we talk about that, what kind of signage would help in the garden to help direct kids to where they should go? You can't have 24 kids around of one bed. So one of the things that we try to do is break it up between 2 different groups or 3 different groups. So how do you help them get visual cues for where to go and how to be? Yeah.
Okay, so we're still frozen. So if Sue can keep moving around, I'll let you know when we aren't frozen anymore, but we can still hear you, which is great.
Oh, I was going to take you next to the food. How are we doing for time?
We have about 8 minutes till we'll switch over to Annalisa, but if this screen keeps
why
being...
don't I talk, if I'm still frozen, let me just talk about some hints here. So when you're doing your garden, you want to organize multiple people. I was just telling Sue and Tony when we discovered the wasp problem here, that one of the best people is my lead custodian. And you have to build a relationship early, even as you're just starting to think about the garden. To bring
Kirsten,
in
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. It now seems though some cannot hear you. So I think for a moment, let's pause on you and let me bring up Annalisa and let Sue try to move around or
here's Sue,
rejoin. Okay.
She's going to want to talk about this. Oh, wait.
Because for some reason you have no video anymore, which is, thank you all for working with us on this. This is just how this goes. Annalisa, I'm going to go ahead and bring you up as a panelist.
Hey, Carrie.
Yes, Kirsten.
I do have a setup that she had said it would be nice if we could share it. So I set up a harvest system for her.
Yes,
so if there's something for her, I can show it.
Okay.
I see that nest.
We just can't see you right now.
Oh, you can hear me.
I can hear you, but I can't see you. So I think just in the essence of moving time, I'm going to let Annalisa go, and then we're going to come back to you in 10 minutes.
Fabulous.
Okay. So Annalisa, everyone that's watching on Facebook, I'm sorry we're having some technical difficulties, but we're going to switch over now and let Annalisa share about food safety in the garden while I ask Sue and Tony to leave the Zoom and then come back, and we'll see if then they've got better signal. So Kirsten, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just in the essence of moving along, I'm going to have Annalisa go ahead and get started. I need to take Tony off the, oh no, you're up now. Okay, so Annalisa, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay.
And
good morning.
Take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Kirsten. It's so great to see a garden. I know many of us are sad to not be able to be in gardens and farms as much as we want to right now. My name is Annalisa. I'm an extension educator at the University of Minnesota. So I work statewide with farmers and gardeners of all scales, from small homeowners, school gardens, community gardens, up to the largest commercial farms in the state related to food safety. So I help fruit and vegetable growers think about how to reduce the potential that someone might get sick from eating their fresh fruits and vegetables. So at the kind of large commercial scale, it can get slightly complicated. There's quite a few things to consider. At the smaller scale, it's actually pretty simple. A lot of it is common sense that I know a lot of you already know and probably are already doing if you are gardening. So this might be a refresher. I will also say that this is generally a couple hour, session that we do with folks. So this is just kind of a quick overview of it. So I will take the opportunity now to share the screen. And if you are able, feel free to write in questions as I go. Again, this is just kind of a brief overview. Write in questions and I can answer them. So just to be clear, we're serving kids. We're potentially serving folks who are immune compromised, meaning they don't have a fully functioning immune system. If someone's sick, if they have cancer, if they're even pregnant, you don't always know these things, but a little bit of these bacteria or viruses that can be on the fresh produce can get someone potentially pretty sick. If they have a fully functioning immune system, they might get diarrhea or vomiting, be unpleasant, but it's not very serious. For some people, it is serious. So we do have to take this serious. And I do want to be clear that it is completely legal from a state regulatory perspective for you to have produce that's grown in the garden sold to the cafeteria, or frankly sold anywhere if you want to sell it to a farmer's market. There isn't any kind of state statute or food code against that. Now, there might be local ordinances or just a rule from your school that might be different than that. So if that's the case, then you'll need to work through that. But in terms of if I am growing something and I want to sell it to a farmer's market, or I want to sell it anywhere, I don't need a license to do that. It's the product of my farm. So I do want to be clear. So good agricultural practices are the things that we're thinking about here. That's just the general term for them. They're really just the things you do to keep the people safe who eat your fresh fruits and vegetables. It's not a law, it's not a regulation, it's just best practices. So this is how things spread around the garden. Think about these major things when you're thinking about the kids in your garden and the staff in your garden. Clean hands, clean water, getting animals out of there as much as possible, and then definitely always washing our hands after we go to the bathroom. So first of all, it's really important to have students and staff and volunteers wash your hands before you go into the garden, especially in COVID times, but even before COVID times. It's the best way to reduce the potential that hands might cross-contaminate things in our garden. So if you are not there, you might not be there every time. That's okay. You can't absolutely make sure everyone washes their hands every time. At least put a sign up reminding people of your rules, saying before we come in the garden, we make sure to wash our hands. We don't come in when we're sick, and some other basic rules. Train everyone in on what your rules are. This is Kirsten providing a training to the students. It's actually pretty cool. Kids really kind of like it. It allows them to feel like they're a part of something. And like she said about the vandalism, it helps them take ownership and not feel that it's, some rules that an adult put on them. It's like, oh yeah, I want to keep my friends safe as well. Signs are really great. Allow them, try to help have signs up. Like she said, those visual cues are very important, because you can have great policies. If you don't communicate them, then they might get lost. Really make sure to have people know to not come into the garden if they're sick. So these are your policies. Again, this isn't a written rule or anything. This is whatever your policies are. Suggested policies are don't eat in the garden. If you're munching, if you want to try some cherry tomatoes, totally great. Make sure to do that not while you're harvesting, so that your hand isn't going up into your mouth and then back into the container. That container of cherry tomatoes might then go to friends and family. So okay to eat those cherry tomatoes, just maybe do it before or after you harvest. And I know that one can be tough with kids because it's sure fun to pop them in our mouth. But again, we have to think about when we're giving this to our friends, they expect us to have clean hands and to think about those things. So again, the hand washing, just really make sure that it happens. Make sure that there's some place for them to do it, even if it's in the school. Sanitizer is not a replacement. You can use sanitizer, but you still need to wash your hands, because if your hands are soiled, if there's any visible soil, that sanitizer won't work. Make sure, most of us, many people are going to be using municipal water. That's totally fine. Municipal water is tested. It's fully potable. You shouldn't need to worry about it. Do think about the lines. So think about the distribution lines, the hoses. Make sure that occasionally those are getting dried out. Ideally, they're not on the ground. They're hung up. They're on a hose reel so that bacteria and things don't crawl up into those hoses as much as possible. If you're using, I would not use water sources like ponds or streams or lakes. Farmers use those with great caution and with a lot of management. But in this scenario, I think that would be pretty challenging. So think about that water being potable. So rain barrels, many of us might want to use those, and they're totally acceptable for those pollinator gardens, for the stuff that you're not going to eat. But the bacterial levels have been shown to be can be significant in these rain barrels, and that's simply and the chemicals. So think about where that water's coming from. It's coming from a roof. It's going to come off and potentially have quite a lot of heavy metals and potentially bacteria in there. It's just too great of a risk. So if this is the only source of water you have, then we can think about how we might be able to treat that, for example. But if you would all have access to municipal water, city water, go ahead and use that. Absolutely use a rain barrel and talk about water saving and talk about water cycle, but then put that water on the non-edible food crops. So during harvest, make sure to wash your hands well. Like I said, think about harvest as kind of a separate thing. So we do other things, get your hands dirty, totally fine, but then wash up well before you start harvesting. Because remember, you're harvesting, you're touching someone else's food. And you need to kind of think about that. That's an honor, and that needs to be taken seriously. Look for signs of animals. So if you have a lot of rabbits, if you have other things, you're going to see a bit of poop in the garden. That's okay. But do your best to not harvest stuff that has a lot of poop around it. And have kids tell an adult if you see poop, don't touch it, tell an adult, and then the adult can remove it. You know, it's not something to completely freak out about, but animal feces absolutely can cause contaminations. The people have definitely been sickened. There's been large national outbreaks traced back to deer particularly. And also it's just kind of gross. If you see something that's been nibbled by rabbits, we don't want to bring that in and have that served to folks. It's just not worth the risk. So that can go in the compost pile, but that's a good lesson too. Containers, think about having the containers be cleanable and sanitizable. That's a cute little basket, but it's not for food. It's meant for display. It's meant for sitting on a shelf. So I would not use that basket to actually put my fresh peas into. Again, you can do that at home. A student might do that at home. These are my peas from my garden that I picked, and I thought, that's not a cleanable and sanitizable surface. I can do that for my family. If I was harvesting that for my neighbor, for my elderly neighbor, I would not make that decision for him, and I would use a clean bowl that I can clean before I use. Again, just look for those signs of animals. That tomato on the bottom right there, you don't want to harvest that. That poop on there is not, the science is very clear that poop, once you rinse it off, the pathogens are definitely likely still present on that tomato. It's not worth thinking that you can bring it in and wash it off. Just leave it in the garden and then throw it in the compost if you want. So clean and sanitize those tools and equipment. Now this might be done in a kitchen, totally fine. This is going to look different everywhere, but think about your tools, your buckets, the things that you're putting into. Really, it's no different than your dishes. You want them to be clean. This is touching your food. So a good way is, totes get dirty, them out in the garden. So you got to spray them off well, and then occasionally, a couple times a season, scrub them with some soap and water, some Dawn detergent, spray them again with a hose, and then spritz with a sanitizer, a bleach solution, or there's a number of other sanitizers. I would talk to your kitchen or your custodial staff about sanitizers that are allowed for use. But it doesn't have to be fancy, just occasionally thinking about getting those containers clean. It needs to be someone's job. So you can absolutely wash the produce before it goes into the kitchen. For example, if this was going to go into your cafeteria, some things should not be washed until they're right before they're eaten. Fresh berries, herbs, those are going to start breaking down really fast. You would not wash those. They would wash them in the kitchen right before they're served. But definitely I would have a conversation with who's ever going to be buying or getting your produce and serving it. They might not want you to wash it. They might want to doing all the washing in the cafeteria. If so, that's better, because that's a better place to wash produce. If you're going to be washing it outside, just think about setting up a system that's going to be as clean as possible, trying to use clean totes and clean water in there. That picture on the bottom has potable water in it, and they have 3 actual buckets to rinse their greens in, because greens can get pretty dirty, right? So they've got 1 that gets the bulk of the soil off, and then 2 more. Those will keep that greens pretty clean. But remember, clean hands going in there. Think about this wash step pretty critically. It's where if there is contamination happening in the process, it often is this wash step, because that water is really good at moving stuff around. So if there's some dirt on your, potential contamination on your hands or on some of that produce, that water could potentially mingle it all around. So if you want to, Kirsten, I know, has developed a really basic food safety plan for the garden. That's a nice kind of document that everyone can share to say, hey, here's our policies. Does not need to be very fancy, like literally a page is just fine. Just saying kind of, we wash our hands, we don't come into the garden when we're sick, we look for signs of animals. We do have a template for you as well that we can make sure to get out for you. So just kind of thinking through the fact that this is food that other people will be eating. They could be sickened if we don't take some basic steps. Don't get freaked out about it, but just thinking about this as, do the things to someone's food that you would want someone to do to your food, and handle it appropriately. So that's it.
Lisa?
Yep.
Thank you for all of that information. We've had several people comment that was really helpful. A lot of people are asking if we can have access to your to that PowerPoint. So I'm wondering if you can send that to me,
Sure.
and then I can share that with everyone. Okay, great. And then I've got time for 2 more questions that I saw, and then we'll get back to Kirsten and company because I can see their video is up now. So the first question was about using bunny or horse manure as fertilizer in a garden. What are the guidelines or thoughts on that?
Great, good question. Yep, that's a whole module I didn't really go into.
Okay.
You can absolutely use animal-based manure. Know that that is a higher risk than a vegetative compost. So let's say you just had vegetable scraps, you can compost that with really no restrictions whatsoever. It's just vegetables, right? If you move into animal-based manure, it absolutely is going to increase the risk there. That's fecal material.
Okay.
Totally okay to use. Put it on in the fall, work it in really well, and do the math, and allow for at least 90 to 120 days from when you apply it to when you harvest the produce. Generally, just do it in the fall. That's what farms do. Work it in really well. You can talk with the students about how that actually improves the availability of those nutrients for the plants. And there you go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And then these last 2 questions both have to do with water. So we have one question about what should the water temperature be to rinse greens? And the other is about, is a saltwater wash a good idea or a bad idea? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yep. So temperature is, I would have it quite cold. I mean, basically it's going to be the temperature of the water that comes out of the faucet. You're not assuming it's coming out of a hose, and you probably don't have access to heated water there. It should be cold, because a goal of rinsing is also cooling. Post-harvest quality is improved. Cool your produce down as fast as possible. It's going to last longer and be fresher and crisper. So cold water is great for greens. Don't add any salt. Don't add anything to your water. Don't add vinegar, nothing. There are approved sanitizers for wash water that farms use. I would hesitate to use it at this scale. I think it would be too complicated. Just fresh water, no produce rinses or anything.
Okay. Well, thank you, Annalisa, again for joining us today and sharing all of that information with us. I will get that PowerPoint from you to share with everyone. And thanks, Annalisa.
You're welcome. Thanks.
All right, Tony and Kirsten, we are headed back to you. You have video again. Hooray. Go ahead and talk, and let me see if I can hear you. Oh, I cannot hear you yet because you are on mute. I'm going to ask Sue to unmute. We should be able to hear in just a moment. Nope, Sue needs to hit the unmute button. Still can't hear you. Technology is so fun, everyone. Tony's phone is still muted, so we can't hear anyone. That's strange. Also, there's only one of you that is up on the screen.
Hello.
Oh, there we
Hello.
go. I don't think you have Kirsten's Zoom account up, friends. How about
Oh,
you
here,
just
we can
take
just,
off the headsets and talk? If there's no,
Hi. I just wanted
oh, that's still not gonna work, friends.
Can you hear now? Carrie, can you hear us?
Barely,
Oh,
because I think the headsets are still attached.
so here's what I want to do is I want to show you what she was talking about. Here's your aquatainer. We filled it with water. It has a latch that can stay on. Oops.
Carrie,
this is working.
Kirsten yells, we can hear her.
So I turn it on, I take the soap, I wash.
I can't hear Kirsten because the headset is attached. Can't hear Kirsten. But I think she's telling us all about this wonderful hand washing station that she has that Annalisa showed us. Which if you don't have a hand washing station, this is probably a very important piece to today. I know, thinking back to when I was doing a school garden, I did not think of doing this before, and it's a really great idea. Now, Kirsten, I don't know if you can hear me, but do you have some other bins behind you that are set up for harvesting? Oh, wonderful. Well, I might just turn my camera on for a moment so that you can see me while we try to figure out what's going on with our video here. We had 8 minutes left during this time that we had a couple of things. Oh, they're back. Let me, okay. So we can see their lovely setup. And there's Tony.
It's all good. Ask her if
Tony?
she can hear. I think she can hear.
I can hear you when you're talking a little bit. What are those bins
She can
behind
hear
you
when
that
you're
are set
talking.
up?
So talk
Oh,
loud.
hi, Carrie. Okay, so we're sorry about the connection. The Wi-Fi, of course, worked during our practice round, and then today it's not raining on us. We're happy about that. But the clouds and maybe the moisture are affecting our connection, which is a total bummer. But Kirsten was showing you the hand washing station that we can put in the garden right here, and so you saw her doing it even though you couldn't have our sound then. And this is a super simple thing that Annalisa also showed you how to get. And we'll add that link. There's a link that shows you exactly how to do make a hand washing station for under $20 on the U of M Extension website. And there's a video that even shows you how to do that. So we'll share that link on our Facebook page. I also have a video of me visiting a garden in a western suburb at Bluff Creek Elementary. Hi, Anna, if you're out there. And we demoed how students used the hand washing station in that garden. So it's just a great thing to add to your school garden that's super easy and also very inexpensive. It could also, I'm thinking about this, Sue. I don't know if all the teachers that are with us right now have been on our website and checked out our grants, but Egg in the Classroom has grant opportunities every fall. So that could even be something that a school, if they were looking at starting a garden, they could even think about writing a grant to do their simple hand washing station. I know that we have had a little bit of trouble. I'm hoping that you were able to see most of our video, but we want to thank you for coming to Bruce Vento Elementary School. We want you to think about how that you can add learning, how you can add gardening into your classroom as teachers. And maybe you don't have space outside. I work with a teacher that also, if we're thinking about grants, wrote a grant to get a grow tower. So that is, you don't have space outside, you have space inside where you can grow things. And so our role at Egg in the Classroom too is to help you and give you resources for that. So we could even connect you to teachers that have had success with that, because we have worked with teachers that have had great success using grow towers inside the building. And then you don't have to worry about getting stung by a hornet, which poor Kirsten got stung by two this morning. So again, something that wasn't here 2 weeks ago when we were here, but we're rolling with it. And we're really excited to show you the lessons that we have for each of the Zoom rooms. that can be used in the classroom related to gardening and related to growing food. So if you want to, during this break time, you can come on over.
Oh, darn. We must have lost them once again. Well, I saw a couple of questions in here from Karen about a non-COVID situation. Did you have community members taking the produce from the garden? And while I can't speak for Kirsten, when I had a school garden over the summer, I had a garden night where the kids could come and volunteer, some teachers, and then whoever came that night, they got to take that produce home. So I know lots of people either do it that way or they will harvest it and take it to secondhand harvest or a food bank. And we were able to do that at times, just depending on how much produce that we had. I think the tricky thing about, there was another question on here about using produce in this cafeteria. The tricky parts about the cafeteria or the taking it to your local food bank is just the amount of produce that you have. If you have, 3 or 4 tomatoes, 1 squash, a head of lettuce, that's a little difficult for particularly the cafeteria to use on a larger scale. So I found cherry tomatoes were really helpful because that was an easy thing to prep and put on like the salad bar line. And if we planted enough tomatoes, we could have a nice selection of that to go in the cafeteria. But I think you just have to work with your school cafeteria manager and ask them if they're willing to use it and what would be those processes that they'd want you to have in place as far as food safety and what they could use that when you're planning out your garden. Let's see, we've got 2 or 3 minutes here left before we take our break. Oh, and we have a video back up from our friends in the garden, which is far more exciting than me. So they are still on mute. They're talking to someone. They are not on mute.
I was talking. Did you see the circle the whole time?
Can I ask you guys one more question?
Carrie, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Oh, yeah, we just needed to scroll over. We just needed to scroll over before. So Kirsten had a top 10 list. Do you want to share, Kirsten?
That would be great.
There's 2 minutes.
All right. So one thing you might have heard is you got to organize. No way can one person do any of this. I have someone who's really good about pollinators. I work with the vegetables. I work on layout and coordinating time. So organize people, connect with your lead engineer, make sure you have the permission of the principal right away. So then you want to have a grand plan. Take some time as a school to talk about what would a school garden mean for your school? What would it do? What would you like to have as a result? What would change? How would it make your school better? So how would you do that? And then every year you're going to have to do an annual plan. It doesn't have to be incredibly long, 1 to 2 pages, but it's something that you can share to all those multiple people so that they're all in the know of what's happening, so that they know when and how and who and why. Where does the produce go? If you're going to harvest it, who's harvesting the produce? Do they have training on the food safety protocols? And then, of course, that annual plan should be informed by an assessment. Do it every fall. So once that garden is done, it's usually by the end of October. Maybe it's finally put down for the winter. Now you're leading into November, December. That's a great time to do an assessment. Ask people. It doesn't have to be a long survey. It could just be a dinner when we get to be together again. It could be any of those things, and maybe it's phone calls for right now, and that's fine too. Maybe it's a conference call for people who are familiar with that. And make sure, again, you're always keeping it kid-centric. So I have kid-centric here and I have kid-centric here as well, because once you get done with the design layout, you find the right tools and you make sure you have an annual budget for supplies. You have your food safety and your safety plan in place as well. Like, what if you get stung by a wasp? What should you do? That you've worked with the classroom or there's a school, you've developed agreements for how we're going to behave in the garden. I would say structured over 2 principles: respect yourself and how do we respect others. You can do any other agreements, make sure they're yeses and not nos, not don'ts. So I say use your head before your hands. Look, listen, smell before you start touching, before you start going somewhere. That's one of mine. And then kid-centric. Use inquiry, use a gradual release of responsibility. What's the worst that can happen if it doesn't get planted right? You replant it later. It doesn't matter. What if they pick the wrong thing? What if they pull out a plant that wasn't meant to be pulled out? It's okay. It's a garden. It's one of the gifts of the garden. It can keep giving and giving, and you can give back to the garden as well. And then make sure it's their space. So what kinds of roles do they have in the garden to help maintain? Even as you're doing your project work together, what are the different roles that they have? So those are my top 10. I want to say thank you. Thanks for coming to Bruce Vento Elementary School and bearing with us on our garden tour. Thank you.
Thanks, Sissy.
For joining us. Don't forget 10 o'clock, use the Zoom link, and we'll see you in the for a quick introduction and in the breakout rooms. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.